Okay, we're here and we're streaming to you live tonight from the Lower East Side Tenement Museum in our remote locations. My name is Jason Eisner, and I am the manager for exhibitions and coordination at the Lower East Side Tenement Museum. It's my pleasure tonight to be in dialogue with a marvelous, I'd say, visionary, and for the purposes of talking about her book, Rooted in the Hood. Okay, and it will be kind of a journey through the Lower East Side gardens. Maybe we'll start actually at this point by allowing my wonderful guest to introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Anna Angelidakis. I want to thank the Tenement Museum for inviting me and for giving me the chance to speak about my book. And of course, I want to thank everybody who is participating in this sort of like online event. I was born and raised in Athens, Greece. I came to New York in the mid 80s to study art. I graduated from the School of Visual Arts. And after that, I worked as a graphic designer. So this is sort of like my day job. That's how I make my earning. Parallel to this, I've always had an admiration for photography and writing. So this book, in essence, is the culmination of these two loves, words and visual, and hopefully will be something that you'll find exciting.
I certainly find it exciting, and I think that it fits very nicely into the Tenement Museum, its overall mission and its devotion to telling stories. The combination of visual storytelling and these poetic words as well is really a wonderful part of the book. A word about the Tenement Museum, it's, for those of you who don't know, it's a site that is a public history site. It goes through very powerful moments in history through people's lives, individual people's lives. Who were these people? They were immigrants, migrants, refugees, the general overall makeup of the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And while it is a historic site, there's an idea that this history, it's remote. It's this thing that is maybe far away from us. The whole point of the museum is to make a connection not only to the present moment, to the past, but to see this moment as a historic moment as well. Certainly, there's no denying we're in an incredible moment in history, but the garden movement that we'll be talking about specifically tonight is something that emerged really in the late 60s and 70s and kind of just literally grew and continues to grow today. The reputation the Lower East Side has during this period of time, the late 60s, 70s, and 80s, it looms large in the imagination, and it's there's a truth to it, of course, but it tends to be a bit flat. And so the images of New York during the 70s, it's a financial crisis. There's buildings that are burning. There's a lot of crime. It sort of epitomizes everything that America wanted to see as urban decay. There's quite a bit of racism wrapped up into this period of time, and ironically, it's out of this period of time that these gardens are emerging. These two photographs that are Getty image photographs each describe that reality, but seem to overtake the imagination, overtake the memory of what the Lower East Side is about. And I want us, because we'll spend the whole rest of this time tonight looking close at images, look closely at these two pictures. Because yes, while it's true, we see a lot of rubble, okay? We see a building that is without windows in the image on, I guess, on left. We see some children standing on a pile of rubble and beams, but we also see, you know, these kids are carrying instrument cases. They're carrying their homework. This is a part of their daily life. This is their landscape, but life is going on. All right, there's depressing moments, but these kids are living their lives. The image on the right, we see there's some twisted trees kind of growing, incredible that they're growing at all, you know, speaks to the power and resilience of nature, but they're growing out of this really broken up landscape that is filled with burnt out and overturned cars. But you see this kid who's found a way to string a rope to this tree and is about to take a leap, you know, from the car, sort of make it a swing. And I'm attracted to these two pictures because they are complex, because they offer counter narrative to what is I think often what prevails. You flash forward in time to the gardens today, and you know, you can think about those spaces as we saw in the photograph, just the two photographs prior to this. These spaces have completely transformed, and you know, are really something of a solace. And we'll talk quite a bit more about this as we go. Anybody who lives in New York City and has ventured around might come across a garden. Maybe we're so busy in our daily life that we overlook these gardens. I mean, that's certainly possible too. The book kind of compels us to take a second look. And this, you know, this is a very brief, I have to tell you, this is an extremely brief synopsis of the origin of the garden movement. It is an incredible movement that emerged out of the 70s and 80s. It brought people together who were activists. It brought people together who maybe would have been at odds with one another had they not worked together to make these gardens. You know, the population of the, you know, of this garden community is the neighborhood. So it's bringing people of color together with white residents. It's serving even the people, you know, who needed a break, whatever they were doing. It's these gardens are quite special, but their stories, right, stretching back decades, like Anna's story, stretching back decades. The Tenement Museum being a place where we feature stories of immigration, as Anna mentioned. Her story begins in Athens, Greece. So I think too, a very important part of her vision and the whole direction of this project, which became the book, Rooted in the Hood, begins in Greece. So I want to just turn it over to you to talk about your formative years, your growing up, what immigrating to New York was like. I mean, you said it was to be in school, but what was your you know, connection to the Greek community that was here? Just a sort of general overview. And you can let me know when to move the next slide.
Sure. So I was very fortunate that my dad was a sea captain with a Greek merchant marine. So back in time, when I was about 3 years old, my mom and I boarded Apollo, which was a 20,000-ton cargo ship, and I spent 3 years of my life on this huge ship. I was this little kid on this huge ship. This had a profound effect on me in the sense that I was exposed to so many different places and cultures. And by having a father who was quite a visionary and quite ahead of his time, in the sense that he was a writer, he was a reader, and then on top of that, he was in charge of 30 men on a ship. He taught both my sister and myself, he gave us this sense of purpose, that we have to remain focused, that we have to be able to sort of like face our fears, face the turbulences, but also find beauty, because he always spoke about the sea and about how changeable everything is. and he always encouraged us to see beyond what was supposedly visible. So if we move on the second slide, um, uh, so in essence, for me, this was a journey that not only as a kid I had to sort of like recreate my whole imaginary world, but also I had a chance to really form strong relationship, not only with my father and my mother, but also with the crew. So I came to, even as an adult, I've come to trust the group. I've come to trust and believe in people working together. And I do believe that all that hails back from my background on the ship. As a funny story, the right hand side one, this is actually a real rifle. Often at sea, when the men didn't have anything better to do, they would go out and sort of like shoot birds. And that was one of the days that they figured, hey, why don't you try out? And here I am, with a rifle. Totally, totally magical times, however. Magical times. The best years of my life in many ways.
I will say, as a father now, and with a 2-year-old daughter who you may hear intermittently in this presentation, that photograph of you and your dad just is such a tender image. Like what you said about this being wonderful time in your life. I mean, it's clear in that picture, the joy in that picture is really, really something. So you came to New York City to go to school, and is that correct?
Yes, but also I come from a background that is very socially involved, and we always like to learn and explore. So when I came to New York City, I was fully aware of all the diverse communities that live here, all the different ethnic groups. So I always had my eye on differences between various immigrant groups that came to New York, what they brought with them, the customs, the traditions. Um, it's a fascinating study in essence because often people leave mainland, their country, and then they come here, and sometimes there is a mixture of the old and the new. Some values are better preserved in the new land. Some other values are lost. So it is a fascinating and always evolving socioeconomic thing that is occurring with this beautiful city. And I was always trying to find a way to capture this, except that I never knew that it was going to happen through this book and through the gardens. I was always trying to find a venue of how do you explain all this diversity until this little miracle occurred.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when you came to the city, you said it was the 80s. Were you living on the Lower East Side? How did you come to the
I was
garden?
living on 19th First Avenue, 19th Street. So it was pretty a rough area back then. There weren't like it was pretty desolate actually in many parts of it. And we used to walk down the Bowery, and for me it was like scary and magical because again it was that sense of adventure, of seeing a city like I was curious. I wanted to go to the Polish neighborhood. I wanted to see what the Bowery was like. I didn't care so much about the skyscrapers because those I could see, on the fancy books. I just wanted to discover like the real life of New York City. And the first garden I saw back in the 80s was the Lisa Christie Garden, which is on the Bowery. And I just remember back then a group of people dressed in colorful clothes doing something, digging something. I mean, it was pretty desolate. There was nothing there. And I remember saying, oh my God, look at them. They have such a good energy. Like, what are they doing? And a friend of mine said to me, oh, they're doing this amazing community gardens. I was like, community gardens? What is that? But again, these are impressions. These are memories from when I first arrived, actually.
Yeah, and so that's wild. Almost 40 years later, a book it comes out of it, and the book is wonderful. As I've mentioned, it covers the entire city we're going to devote some time because the Tenement Museum, right, it's located on the Lower East Side. So we're going to do a virtual walking tour of these gardens. And Anna's going to lead us on that. But I did want to mention that the book is, you could do your own, you could get the book and it's your own self-guided walking tour. You know, it has these maps, which are just wonderful. It's a kind of beautiful design that accompanies the book itself. And I remember in an earlier conversation, Anna, you'd mentioned as that you grew up on a boat, as you told everybody, but that maps were a very huge part of your life. And so when you were going about creating your, you know, imagining this book and exploring these gardens, were you making your own maps?
Well, I had to in the end, because I would wander around and I would see this beautiful garden. I'd be like, oh my God. And then I would want to visit it the next day and I would be, where was it? So I started very, very humbly. I had like a little notebook and I would sort of like say, okay, Avenue C and 3rd. And then I would go further up and finally I said, you know what? I really need a map. Now, when I started this project, there were no available maps other than sort of like the Green Organization, which had a more comprehensive map. But even that, it was a little difficult for me to follow. So I decided to create my own. And then, of course, moving forwards, when the book, when I was working on the book, a very, very dear friend of mine, an extraordinary artist and illustrator, Donald Murphy, said, I would love to work on the maps. And Donald just flew with the project, and he did these extraordinary watercolors. And I mean, and it is because of these maps that one really now can take the book and walk around and find them, and then read. The numbers correspond with the different gardens mentioned in the book, so it's an easy reference guide as well. So yeah.
Yeah, and the gardens are, you know, like nowadays one of the more safer places to be and to sit and think and reflect. But you know, the way it works, you know, like you mentioned, you can see a garden or you see a thing in your passing and, you know, inspired by it, but then you want to revisit it and you forget it. You do need some kind of marker, a memory of some kind. And I think for me, I'll say for myself, I've walked past some of the gardens that are featured in this book. I've just like blown right past them. It's been something that registers only unconsciously, even that there's like, okay, there's a fence, some green stuff, but I'm on my way, you know, to the deli or something, wherever I'm going. So I'm interested to learn, because the creation of your book, the genesis of it, is an incredible story, right? I mean, you lived in the city since the 80s and maybe spent 2.5 decades just breezing by gardens, casually looking at colorful people working on them or not even seeing them. What is it that slowed you down? And what got you here?
Right. So in 2008, my father passed away. So I flew back to Athens for the funeral, and then I came back to New York, you know, because I was working and all. But I felt that there was something needed to be said. I needed some time to sort of like process a little my father's loss and be by myself. But I needed a quiet place. I needed something that it would be a little away from the traffic and the people and the noise. So I found myself walking down on Avenue C and 9th Street, and I was sort of like lost in thoughts. And I saw this sign that said, "Welcome, the garden is open." Now I have passed by that particular area many times. I had never seen the sign, or I had never noticed the sign. So I entered, and literally I thought that I had stepped into another world. It was towards the middle late spring, and everything was blooming. It was the richness of the flowers and the colors and the scents. I thought I was like in a small oasis, and I was like, where am I? So I literally sat. There was a small bench beneath a willow tree, and I sat there, and I was observing. I felt that this place was so tranquil and so appropriate for what I was looking for. And as I was there, I noticed this woman, which you see here. Her name is Maria, and Soares, and she's the queen. She's the magician of the garden. When I first met her, we had eye contact. She acknowledged my presence. I acknowledged her presence, but we kind of like kept aside, as if she sensed that I kind of needed my distance, which I thought that it was so appropriate. And then consequently, after I started going back and back, I came to speak with her and learn more about her. And a friendship was formed that I still have to this day. And in essence, she taught me about everything about the garden, like what they were planting, what was growing, what was not growing. But more than anything, it's this sincere love that she has for the earth. And for me, it's like, it's the sea that I'm more accustomed to, but the earth is equally powerful. And it kind of like there was a substance of my journey. Suddenly I felt that this garden had everything, had all the mystery. So it made me think that, you don't have to crisscross the oceans. Sometimes you can find beauty right around your corner. And having made this realization, it was almost as if a door opened. Suddenly, I left the garden and I saw another green small oasis. And I'm like, oh my God, there's another garden and another garden. So it was as if like this veil was lifted from my eyes. And I went back home and I was saying to my friends, there are all these gardens like in Alphabet City, like we've been walking. And they were like, where in Alphabet City? And I'm like, right on Avenue C. So it made me think that, look, all of us, like we are not seeing. And also it took me back to my father when he would always say, like, open your eyes. It's not what's obvious. Look behind the fence, in essence. And for me, that picture on the left, the salamander that you see, that was the first picture that I took on that very first day that I walked into this garden. And the reason it's so important for me, it's because salamanders are also representatives of magic and transformation and of something new beginning. And all these rhinestones that they were glistening in the light. I don't know. I knew that something important had occurred in my life at that very moment. So I have a very dear connection with this image and the garden, because the garden also is like, it's alive in every season. You go in spring, there are tulips blooming. You go to Halloween, as you see on the right hand side. There you have the Day of the Dead that the people, the garden are putting together these installations. You have Christmas, the Christmas lights are on. Like, it's very, very involved and very to the heart of the community. And it's really a small Eden in the middle of our city.
Yeah, and I think that's really wonderfully put. This is one small Eden, but there are these other ones all over the place too. And this again is part of that. It's coming out of that period of time where most people are imagining, buildings on fire and the worst things possible of a city. This is also emerging at the exact same moment. So it's I think about that, your dad, with the his binoculars scanning, the distance for some deeper something else, this search. And that's what's really important and I think vital about the Tenement Museum's work, is that it's always encouraging us to look more, look deeper. What are these other stories that are happening, these other human stories where you can have these powerful connections? I'll speak for a minute about this second garden, which is Mfinda Kalunga Garden, in honor of the second African burial ground. And it's unique in all the other gardens on the Lower East Side in that it's actually situated in the middle of a New York City park. That while most of the other gardens that we see here and that you can visit, they're on the sites of what was the foundation of an old building. This is really in the middle of a park. and the man is sitting down in the purple, with he's got his hat on as he always does, his ball cap. That's Bob Humber. He's the person who almost single-handedly reclaimed this section of the park at a time when it was really, really in trouble. He is an incredible man and a great friend of mine and of the Lower East Side. But again, it's to your point. You go to this garden. I was a part of a CSA that had their drop off over there, and I would totally start conversations with him over the years. It just grew. His oral history is something that lives now in the Tenement Museum as well. But you didn't know when you took this picture that he was like the big guy, the grandfather, actually, as he is known, of Mafinda Kalunga. So I'm curious to hear your impression of him and your thoughts for this garden.
Yeah, one of the things that has been happening to me a lot while I was working on this project, there are all these connections. I was at the garden at different times. There was Bob. I didn't know who he was. There were all these people walking up and down, and there was something about his posturing and his immediacy, talking with the young man and the signage, that I was like, wow, this is such a beautiful shot of these two people that I had no idea about. Unbeknown to me, that in essence he is the essence of this garden, and it could have been anyone else, but no, I happened to take a picture of Bob. Later on in time, and after I knew that this presentation was going to happen with the Tenement Museum, I actually bumped into him again. And this time I walked up and I introduced myself to him, and I said that, you're in this picture in the book. And it was just this joy that I saw in his face. And again, it's like, it's a recognition for all of us. It's a recognition of me towards him, knowing how much he's given to the community. And in a way, it's a small gift to him to be part of this book. And none of this was planned or organized. It just happened. The other thing that blew my mind away with this garden is I was very curious about the name. And that was before I even knew anything about being really a burial site, for an African burial site. So when I found out the name of the garden means really the garden at the other side of the world. Now, if you don't know about it, you're like, well, that's kind of interesting. So I kind of like dug a little deeper, and then I found out that there is this myth in Congolese mythology that talks about these two parallel worlds that exist, and one is the world of the living, and one is the world of the dead. When someone dies, they cross a mountain, they cross a river, and then they reach this small village, which is the exact replica of what they left behind. But now they have all their ancestors, they are together, and everything is more plentiful and more real, and or however you want to really interpret it. And every night, the people of they help the sun rise for the living, and then at the end of the day, the living sort of like give back the setting sun to the dead. So just by name, I felt like, look how much history I just learned just by entering again another gate that really said nothing on the outside to me. The other thing that is extraordinary about this garden are these very mysterious mosaic figures that they're sort of like sentinels, which I like to also picture them as they are like the guardians of the dead in many ways. They are these figures all around the garden. They were actually made as a commemoration for the 9/11 event. And these are the figures of young children that they kind of like made them out of. They made the mold based on their own bodies, and then they worked with little mosaics, and there were 30 kids who participated, and 9 of them were selected, and now they are still weathering the elements and the rain and the snow. But like the garden, they are still standing strong. And that is the name, actually. The name of that project is Standing Strong.
Yeah, I mean, you don't. It's they're powerful. They're really powerful in the garden, and something that we'll see throughout in the rest of the presentation is this wonderful interplay between the natural environment and parts of the city, and then parts of art. These sort of handmade things, or even the right. This bodhisattva is something that I'm not sure if it was handmade, but it's really a very powerful part of this garden looking. Well, maybe tell us a little bit about this garden. Where are we now?
Yes.
We're on Second Street.
Yes, and that's right, Second and the Bowery. Uh, this is the beauty about this garden, is that each one has its own personality. It's not just the people who are beautiful that you meet, it's also the gardens. Like some gardens are very creative, some gardens are very quiet, some gardens are exuberant, some of them are very moody, almost a little sort of like a little on the darker side. Uh, the Petit Versailles garden is this joyful place. There are always performances happening. The founders of the garden is Pierre Kramer and Jack Waters, and in essence, they are the ones who kind of like organized everything, brought together the community to clear the grounds. And they belong to this organization called Allied Productions, which are very, very heavily involved in the theater and the performing arts. So this garden is really a place that every summer musicians are invited, artists, there are paintings, exhibits, and it's one of the oldest and sort of like more traditional community gardens. And this Lord Shiva there, that's the first thing I noticed. There are always candles burning and incense floating in the air. It's beautiful in the summer months. Unfortunately, with COVID, we didn't have a chance to sort of like have so many performances there. But again, it's a testament to the creativity of the human spirit. I mean, the garden is tiny, and yet every time you go there, there's something new, a new performance, something new to learn, and sort of like visually enjoy.
Mm-hmm. Part of what I think is just so wonderful about this, and it's an ethic in all the gardens. It emerges in different ways in each garden. Is this uh, resourcefulness? So we see in the picture on the right, while there's all these wonderful and rich it's biodiversity happening, right, and some vine growing up a black painted wall. There are these mirrors, broken mirrors, probably found and just propped against the wall, being able to, literally reflect. It's a place of reflection. You can go and sort of like whatever, see yourself and check out how, you look. But I think it can reflect the sky. It reflects the light. This kind of poetry, it's a subtle kind of resourceful, poetry, minimalist, but really, really potent, and natural. It's kind of wonderful to see the combination of the urban setting and this organic, natural setting really playing with one another, and the people who are building these gardens really working to kind of facilitate that play, which makes me, let's see, want to travel up to our next stop. All right, and here we are. See, the wonderful wonders of virtual tour is you don't have to spend too much time walking around. You can just switch the slide and be, on East 8th Street between Avenue C and D, and here we are.
Yeah, and again, this is a garden that actually there are two gardens. There are two sisters gardens. The only entrance is toward the green oasis, which is the one that you see on the left hand side. The main characteristic is this red gazebo. When I first encountered this garden with the maple leaves turning, or I don't know, I felt I was in Japan. I lived in Japan for almost like 4 months, and there was something I thought I don't know. I thought it was like that was not in the Lower Side for sure. And then as I walked in, uh, sure enough, there was a pond with koi fish. So there was another little detail that I was like, are my eyes playing playing a game? Of course, now I know that many gardens have koi fish, but for me, that was the first garden that I did see the koi fish. So again, it was like a connection. And while you walk through the garden, as you meander, you go to the sister garden, which is the Gilbert's sculpture garden. And Gilbert was a local artist and sculptor, and everything was created by found materials, things that you would find in the streets, wood, stone. His big love was his wife, Matilda, and a lot of these sculptures are, in essence, commemorated to her. Uh, as I walked by this garden about 2 weeks ago, and I think they're reworking the ground, so I'm not sure how it's going to look when it's all put back in place. But I felt very privileged that I had captured that side of the garden as it was when I about like these photographs are about almost like 8 years ago. So I would be very curious to see how this will have changed. Another thing that is so amazing is that the garden is also like a big, they have all these stray cats and there's shelter for them. And you walk around and you feel as if you have these little spirits following you and you have absolutely no idea what it is. And then you see these eyes sort of like looking through the foliage. And here's the cat that you see. And another thing that was very interesting for me, which I don't have that photograph here. Sometimes I would take photographs, and then when I go home and would look at them closely, I would find more and more cats. I was like, my God, there were so many more than I thought. And it's just a wonderful place. There is a stage because the Green Oasis Garden was created by Reynaldo Arenas, who was a theater aficionado. So if you go to Daly's Garden, there is a stage. There are a lot of performances. They do a lot of children's plays. There's a big emphasis on children. They have big beehives that they are growing. They have barbecue nights. So it's a very, very active and a very loved garden in Alphabet City.
Yeah, I mean, and I really enjoy the surprise of being in these gardens, and this sense of never really being alone in the garden, but not in a creepy way, you know. that being surrounded by cat spirits is kind of wonderful, although, you know, sure, when there's so many of them, you do get a little bit paranoid. There's the sculptural edition is also a theme that runs throughout a lot of these gardens. And um, here we are now. I mean, we've jumped back to Second Avenue or Second Street between B and C, and we're in a garden that's almost entirely devoted to sculpture. Let's hear the story here.
So this garden is very, very important because it primarily features African Americans art. A lot of there is an extraordinary. The owner of the gallery has an extraordinary collection of very, very important African American artists. Here we see just a small sample of what at various times with various messaging. Every single statue has a little story behind it. What it's interesting about this garden, and again, it's what I first encountered, is that it's very hard to enter. Although it is a public garden, most of the times the gate is closed. But I felt that that was very appropriate because there is a certain distance that kind of like makes you stop and look inside. And I think it's very appropriate in the sense that a lot of these artists have always been sort of like blocked out of many things. And for me, it was an excellent example of, in essence, well, you are invited, but you are not. So it was like making you feel a little in reverse. How does it feel when your work is not seen? Or how does it feel when you're not appreciated? And it was very refreshing because I was not I was not the important element. It was the statues and the sculptures that were important. I was the outsider looking in, and for me that was a it was a very very important lesson of again not taking anything for granted and see how much talent really exists in the neighborhood and around the community.
That's a really poetic interpretation. I gotta say, I'm quite moved by that, and it's true. I feel like the photograph too, the photograph of winter where we see the snow falling, and these figures. Well, the sculptures, not all of them are figurative, but in the foreground is a very figurative uh, sculpture. It looks like it's made of iron and maybe stained glass. It's There's something really powerful about it. It's an undeniable presence, almost a claiming of space. Like this is ours. This belongs to us. And it's your description of being having a hard time getting into the garden is a really poetic one. I also really enjoy the surprise of the sculpture depicted on the right. The rust of the metal that's standing out as orange against this green foliage. It really is subtle, although the contrast is like extreme. You could walk by that and it really begs a second look. Like, oh, that's a person, on there. But what is it? What I mean, are they emerging from the stone, or are they attached to the stone and sinking? It's pretty good, pretty good.
They have
You,
names. The one on the left is called Bobo, the flying man.
Mhm.
I think it's absolutely another. It's like very mysterious. And the sculpture on the right is called Tall Dapper Derby Man Who Holds the Key. So
Yeah,
you
Miss.
you
It,
ponder on that.
yeah, I think that adds a layer and gives you something else to be thinking about when looking at those images. We're going to move on just because, and I feel like we're going to be pressed for time. It's always what happens on any kind of tour at the Tenement Museum. We always jam it in. But here we're going to East Fifth Street between C and D. And tell us about this structure around the willow tree. We see it on the left in snow, and we see it on the right in the full of summer, it looks like. And it's another theme that is current throughout the book, is to explore the seasons in these gardens. And really having green space does allow you to really see the range and experience the turn of the season. But key us into what's happening here.
Yeah. First of all, this garden is very unique in the sense that it has three ecosystems. It's woodland, wetland, and meadow. And all this is man-made. All is done by the community, just local people, activists, artists that came together and worked and cleared the grounds. Right now, it's one of they have a whole host of medicinal plants. They offer classes for kids to go in, learn, sort of like to understand what grows out in nature, away from the city sometimes. This particular structure caught my attention. I had never seen anything like it. Apparently, it was created by Roderick Romero, who is in essence a tree artist. And when I first encountered it, you could climb up and go inside, and I was absolutely stunned with the messaging. Some of those was very encouraging, all about love, or some of them were all about curses, or some of it was about like death and dying. It was like look, the community was writing little messages inside the roots of this tree, which I thought it was very very poignant. Unfortunately, I guess the structure has been around for quite a while. And last time I went, which was almost like a month ago, it's they had to bring down the roots or the whole construction now is changed, and they're putting up something new. And I'm sure that many other generations would play and write the messaging there and bring life to it. For me, it was a little sad in the sense that I was just so drawn with the beauty of this treehouse that I'm kind of happy that I have those photographs, because there will be a time that I will look so far in the past and say, "Oh my God, was there such a thing like this in this garden?" So I'm privileged that I had a chance to capture those two.
Yeah, and I guess that's one of those things we, it's a cycle, like the seasons have cycles, and these things live, and in some cases die and disappear, but the photograph becomes this primary source, another thing the museum is really into. So we can really look back, and the photograph has the power to jog those memories or inspire that type of inquiry. What is this? Oh yes, I remember I wrote this message to, so-and-so on the, carved it in there and it's gone, right? What happens to that memory? It can disappear. So having these photographs is always just an incredible reminder of that time. I think we're gonna jump ahead a little bit. Let's settle here at 6th Street and Avenue B. Here's another example of some eyes staring at you. It's not cats in this case, but it's this, I'm not sure what what sculpture I'm looking at here, but what's your thoughts on the 6th Street and Avenue B garden?
Well, this garden, I call the actually the little sculpture on the left the shy boy. And again, it was one of those, you couldn't hardly see it. It was this tiny little statue hidden behind the foliage. And I saw it outside the garden. I mean, here's this big garden, and my eye goes in this little tiny sculpture. So I went in and I moved the leaves a little so I could see him better. And I named him the shy boy because he's very shy. Sometimes you can't see him anymore. But what I fell in love with this garden in the sense that it is very active in the community. It has this gorgeous stage that you see on the right. They host all kinds of events, from music festivals to poetry readings to just family gatherings. It's a very, very alive and active garden that caters to all groups, age groups, adults, young children. And there is so much, every time I go in this garden, there's something new to be discovered. I walk in and I see something, and then I go back a week later, something has moved, or something has been sort of like cleared, and there are always new little stories told in the little plots. People are very, very connected to this particular garden. I mean, like all the gardens actually, the people are very connected to them. But for me, the fact that if you see the picture on the right, the stage is like this beautiful sort of like very almost like surreal image, and then in the back, if you see the sun rising, it's the Empire State Building. I think that is so sort of like New York, and again, such a little detail. Not to mention that I absolutely adore the structure of this stage. I think it's a true masterpiece, and it was done by people from the community.
And there's a great connection. The Tenement Museum of my colleague and friend had their wedding ceremony here on this stage.
Oh, wow.
So there's really something. It's such a groove to be, in a natural space and then see this painting of a natural space with the New York City skyline poking up, and this incredible red sun in the distance. It takes me ahead. We're going to jump ahead to our garden here to talk about murals, which is what I'd like to maybe focus on for the rest of the program. The murals was a huge part of the Lower East Side during this 70s and 80s period, as the gardens were emerging, to kind of bring back the community and express the concerns of the community. The people rallied together, art groups mobilized, and used the walls of buildings as a canvas. So many of the walls that surround these gardens are covered in paintings. Let's hear some story about where are we now? We've moved over to 9th Street between B and C.
Correct.
Okay, La Plaza Cultural.
This is a very, very, I sometimes think of it as a political art park. There is a lot of history of the community in literally embedded in the grounds of this place. The mural of on the left is part of a much larger mural called La Lucha Continua, which is the struggle continues, and that was created in the 70s under the auspice of this extraordinary muralist Eva Cockcroft. And what Eva did is she invited muralists from all over the world, and particularly from Latin America. And in essence, people addressed issues that had to deal with the unsafe conditions in the neighborhood, education, police brutality, uh, uh, not only on the local level, but the invasion of many countries by the United States at that time period, gentrification, feminism was very big in these murals. And this is the only remaining part of that mural, which really sort of like surrounded the garden. There are some amazing books and photographs that if one was to visit the La Plaza Cultural website, there is a very, very beautiful and very, very thorough historical tour about how these murals came about that I encourage everyone to go and study, and then you really understand the essence and the importance of this. I'm sort of like going very fast over it, but it's worth stopping and reading about it. Also, that garden is a very, very alive community. Like they celebrate all the seasons. They have amazing events. They are very, very active. The mural on the right is a newer addition that happened. That caused a certain some people in the community care for it. Some people in the community did not care for it. But the reason I place those two together is to show that when a mural is done, it's not just the artist that draw they come with the creation. Then the community has to go back and they have to talk and they have to agree and they have to sort of like appreciate or not. And that's where dialogue starts. And in that way, although again, the one on the right has received some criticism, for me, it's another it's another way of communication, of decision making on the local level, and where the system and democracy and opinions work, and there is respect, and at the end, the decision was made. So it is a very beautiful garden in the sense that there is also this fence made out of plastic bottles and uh, car tires. I don't have a photograph of that on that particular slide presentation, which was done by this very, very loving, in essence, Lower Side anarchist, Ronaldo Politi, and it's called the Winter Flowers. So it's something also worth seeing in the garden. And it's a garden that there's so much to explore, just from the plots to the performances. It's one of my favorite ones.
And I love that you brought up this idea of dialogue, that the murals can spark a conversation and even be the genesis of disagreements, but people are still having these conversations, and they're really dynamic spaces to be in. You know, a sense of ownership is very strong in these gardens, particularly among the people who are the gardeners there. And you know, and I love that in these photographs, you know, that another force that has its say is the natural force. So you see these vines growing over the mural, which start to change the dynamic and even the visual impression of the mural. But I wanted to jump ahead to talk about how these gardens not only function as meeting places and places for reflection, places where people can be in dialogue, but places where people remember. Okay, so, and again, it's connected to murals. I know we just jumped over it because the interest of time, we're running a little short, but the photograph on the right is a memorial portrait by the Lower East Side artist Chico, which when I moved to the city in the late 90s, Chico was everywhere. It's every new week would be a new mural, either something to be kind of celebrating the neighborhood or something to be celebrating the life of somebody who'd passed away. Maybe if you can tell us a little bit about the ceremony that is happening here. This is a bonus. Okay, this picture is not in the book, but it's a powerful image. So let's hear some of this story.
The reason the picture is not in the book is that for me, this project will never end. So I took that photograph once the book was already in the publishing house, and that's what I'm saying. These gardens have a life of their own. They'll never disappoint you. The story starts actually with Nugget on the right hand side. I was walking down the garden and I saw all these candles and all these roses, and I have no idea what was that for. And I asked someone, a passerby, and they said to me, "Oh, this young man, just was shot outside the garden." And I had no name or anything, and it kind of made me wonder, like, wow, this is a young man who passed away and nobody knows about him. And then 2 months later, I'm walking by the garden and I see this extraordinary mural by Chico. And as you mentioned, Jason, he's like the heart. He's like the heartbeat of the neighborhood. This man's ability to, in essence, capture the joy and the pain of the community is extraordinary. And Chico has become almost the spokesperson of a lot of people who either have lost loved ones or who are faced with difficult issues like jail, police brutality, anything that happens in the Lower Side, any subject matter that seems to be of importance to the community, Chico would find a way and represent it. He's been exceptionally loved in the community. Right now, he lives in Florida, but he's very, very involved with young kids in the Lower Side. So he's often invited here to participate in murals. He's an amazing teacher, obviously, for the younger generation. And he seems to be, for me, there's something so poignant. Again, it has to do about death and dying and my father and walking in the gardens. The fact that I found a place that people can commemorate so openly, the loved ones, was deeply, deeply touching. So here I am seeing Nugget, and then 3 years later, I'm walking outside. It's the Day of the Dead. This is completely by happenstance. And this ceremony is taking place, and I walk in, and it's this Aztec ceremony, which is about the Day of the Dead. And I'm thinking, okay, here's Nugget's mural. Now I come by, and there's this Aztec ceremony taking place. How curious and interesting is this? And then at the end of the garden, they had this table that you could write the names of people that you've lost. So I went in and wrote my dad's name in Greek. And I was actually laughing myself, saying, who would have told him that his name would end up in a desk decorated with skulls and feathers in the Lower East Side, saying, hey, Dad, I remember you. So this is what the gardens bring out to people.
Yeah, I think we're gonna end up having to cut the tour a little bit short, and all the more reason to pick up the book. But I think that's a beautiful story to really end it on, because it ties it entirely together. When these gardens they have a power. They brought people together. That's how they were made. They have a power to change the way we think about a particular period of time on the Lower East Side. And they have a power to connect us to our own stories wherever they began and the people that we loved. And we're sort of all growing into this community through these gardens. The book is wonderful. Again, I can't plug it enough. Rooted in the Hood, it's called. And really, it's a shame we didn't have time to talk about how the Lower East Side gardens compare to gardens throughout the city, but that's something you can explore on your own. Thank you all for joining us tonight. And, we look forward to seeing you again, maybe in one of the gardens, or at the very least, at another one of these dialogue sessions. Last words, Anna?
Thank you so much for having me over. I really want to encourage everybody, please visit the Tenement Museum website. This is a jewel of a place. They are in need of money and donations to continue doing this extraordinary work. And honestly, it is because of the museum that I have the opportunity to sort of like speak about something that I love. And this is why places like this are so important in the life of the city. So thank you again, and what a jewel. How lucky we are to have a Tenement Museum.
Kind words, kind words. And on that note, good night, everyone. Good night.